Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1065 just came out, and this was an extremely interesting chapter, mainly because of the final page. But obviously, Seraphim Jinbei did add some more mystery to what the Seraphim exactly are leading up to. So let's talk about that first really quickly, just because the two big things that stand out from Seraphim Jinbei are, one, the fact that he has an artificial devil fruit, or at least what we can only assume, I hope, is an artificial devil fruit, and it's not just that Senor Pink is dead and somehow his fruit ended up in the hands of the world government. I like to think that that's not the case, so I like to believe it's an artificial devil fruit. And two, the fact that the Seraphim are still in the process of maturing, right? So this was something that I speculated on way back when the Seraphim were first introduced, which was, is this really their final forms? Or because they are children, right? They're clearly children and they're being freshly debuted, probably a little bit early. Is it possible that this is still leading to them finally reaching their final transformation, or not even final transformation, but adult mode Seraphim, where they're at full peak strength, which is crazy to think about because Seraphim Mihawk, as a child, was already enough to give Blackbeard, who is a Yonko, a decent scare. And Seraphim Jinbei, I'm not going to say that he gave the Straw Hats, I think that the Straw Hats would take care of him if they, if they really kept going and wanted to finish the fight, right? But at the same time, just the fact that he can cause some trouble for a group of, essentially Yonko's crew that are traveling together, that is something fairly impressive. So the idea that there is another stage to this, and what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg of what the Seraphim can become, that's really, really interesting. And one of the big things that stood out to me is basically, I talked before about how the reveal of the Seraphim, that in itself was kind of the culmination of a lot of little breadcrumbs that Oda had been leaving throughout the New World, of all of these lineage factor testings, the reveal of this race of Lunarians, right? The clone armies that Judge and Vegapunk, etc. had been working on. All of these things kind of led to the creation of the Seraphim, right? But it didn't quite stop there, because in fact, even other things that we were kind of learning about as major experiments that had been focused on throughout the New World for a long time, such as artificial devil fruits, that's playing in right here as well. So the Seraphim really are the joining point, or the conjunction of basically everything that we've seen built up science-wise throughout all of post-time skip in One Piece so far, right? So everything from the artificial devil fruits, the lineage factors, the race, the gene splicing, all of that stuff, the bloodline elements, it's all led up to the Seraphim. That's really, really exciting. It also has led me to wonder, what is the lineup of artificial devil fruits going to be like for the Seraphim? Because it's possible on the one hand that we get to see characters like, Doflamingo Seraphim with a totally different devil fruit than he would normally have, Hancock Seraphim with a totally different devil fruit or something along those lines. Or it's possible that the Seraphim that already would have devil fruits in theory, right? So Hancock would get an artificial Mero no Mi, Doflamingo would get an artificial string fruit, things like that to kind of keep things consistent. And it's just characters like the Jinbei Seraphim or the Mihawk Seraphim who are not organic, who are not normally in their original versions devil fruit users, who would be getting an artificial devil fruit just to help boost them even further. So there's two possibilities that we could look at there. I like to think that Mihawk Seraphim would ultimately end up also with having an artificial devil fruit, so that's something to look forward to. Also, on top of that, the swim fruit, I never thought it's that great of a fruit in Senor Pink's hands, but I think it's a genius move to give it to a fishman, to give it to Jinbei, because the way that he's going to be able to use it in combat, along with the fact that Jinbei is of course a much stronger character than Senor Pink, the way that Jinbei Seraphim is going to be able to use it is going to be, much more potent and much more fitting. Like, this is kind of one of the most perfect fruits that Jinbei, the strongest fishman that we know of, could possibly have. I think that, whatever the hell Mihawk is going to end up having or something like that, be that, as my chat was suggesting, maybe a diamond fruit, maybe something like that, that's going to be really, really cool to see, if that is the case. We know that Vegapunk explained that the Seraphim, as they are, they're already taking a lot of tendencies from their, original individuals, right? I don't know what the way to phrase this as, like their original bloodline sources, or however I don't know the science term for this. They're taking influence from the original Shichibukai, so it's possible that the Mihawk Seraphim would refuse an artificial devil fruit in the first place. All that aside, before we get to ores and everything, let me quickly touch on Vegapunk, because Vegapunk is getting more and more interesting as we see. I think it's such a cool concept that there's just one Vegapunk that is known as Desire, that kind of takes care of all of these needs of eating, sleeping, using the bathroom, everything like that for the rest of the Vegapunks. That's such a cool thing to see, and it seems like the hive mind, or the the link between all these Vegapunk bodies is, I don't know, it goes a little. It's definitely playing with between the idea of like what's just sci-fi versus like Oda's kooky fantasy ideas or whatever. But it's a really, really cool concept. And I think that, you know, when Oda first revealed that he's got 6 Vegapunks or whatever, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, is he doing this just for fun? But even if it is just for fun, I think that it's added a lot of zest or zaniness to this arc so far that I think is really befitting the location and setting that we're at. So I've been loving the 6 bodies of Vegapunk. The main body, Shaka, I suppose, is one that seems like this is kind of the classical version of Vegapunk that we would have expected way back when, right? A scientist from the future through and through, although as Shaka clarifies, really a scientist that's replicating the secrets of the past. For a moment, that line threw me when he said that this is an island from the past. I was like, whoa, are we getting into Toki Toki and time travel and everything like that? But no. It seems as though he more so means that he's replicating basically what the ancient kingdom already had down 800, 900 years ago, right? So that leads to the interesting stuff, which is the final panel, which is obviously, I guess, a mech version of an ancient giant. A mech version of an ancient giant. Some of my viewers were suggesting that perhaps it's an armor or something like that, but it really does seem like a mech because it seems as though this is like a fallen robot, something along those lines, not just an empty armor. So that really calls into question so many things because, look, we know that Oda's been playing with the idea of what the significance of these ancient giants are for some time now, right? It began with Ors, the continent puller, but then that kind of got thrown into question when we learned that there is a giant skull of an Ors-esque creature lying outside of Wano, and Wano itself seems to be some sort of an amalgamation of many different islands potentially, right? So that leads to the question of, okay, and Marco even pointed out that this skull that we're seeing was not always known as Onigashima. So that leads to the question of, okay, is the Ors that we know of, the Thriller Bark Ors, is that the real legit Ors, or is that maybe he himself is a Ors the Second or an Ors Junior of some sort, and the true continent puller of legend was the one that connected Wano, and the legends just kind of blurred together? There's that possibility, but then we've also got this being thrown into the mix, which is that, okay, there were mech versions of these ancient giants at some point. So the idea of the ancient giants, at this point, the visuals of the, you know, ancient giant with the horns and the skull and everything like that, that's come to feel almost synonymous or representative to me of basically the Void Century and the Ancient Kingdom, right? These are a race of creatures that were very, very important to that time period, and they've clearly dwindled very hard to what they are today. To now we've got Kaido, who's some level of descendant of them, from what we can tell, but even that might be an assumption that's too much of a leap to make. All I know is that the idea that Straw Hat that's up there in Marijoa, right? The idea that the Straw Hat that's up there in Marijoa is potentially legitimately like just a Straw Hat for a gigantic sized creature, and has been all along, that maybe Joy Boy was an ancient giant for all that we know. I'm trying to put words together here, but, you know, Joy Boy, ancient giant, the Straw Hat, it's very, very possible at this point that Joy Boy was an ancient giant, maybe just one of the smaller ones or something along those lines. I don't know. I think that at this point, right, Egghead Island is clearly shaping up to be an arc where we're about to get a large set of reveals. I'm not gonna hold my breath for the idea that this is where we learn a lot about the Ancient Kingdom, because obviously the reveals at Laugh Tale are going to be more important for that. So Oda's going to save a lot of that for that period of time, right, in the story. But I do think that this is where we get potentially a new decent info dump, or new decent amount of information on what that could. What the story of the Ancient Kingdom, or what it once was, could entail. We don't know how much Vegapunk knows, or if he knows everything. But Vegapunk is not the first character who's learned the full history or whatever that we've encountered in the story. So it's possible that Vegapunk, kind of like Rayleigh, gives us some hints, some degree of speculation, but ultimately chooses not to give the full thing, may not know the full thing, or Luffy stops him from telling the full thing. As of right now, the way I'm looking at it, I think that with this arc, we are set to get reveals on, to some degree, the Ancient Kingdom, definitely to a significant degree, Dragon, right? Because that was teased at the end of last chapter. And definitely to maybe the full story of basically Bonnie and Kuma, what happened with Kuma, and along that route, basically tying into maybe information about Dragon and the revolutionaries and everything like that. Bonus points, maybe we learn more about Sword and what the hell is going on with Sword in the future of the story. So I like all that stuff. Egghead Island setting up to be an absolutely I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's going to be like one of the best arcs in One Piece or something like that, but I think it's going to be one of the most information-packed and exciting information-packed arcs in One Piece, which is always really, really fun to get. So we're always used to getting these post-arc, post-major arc info dumps, so it just feels like with this, it's not even stopping at the in-between islands phase. It feels like Egghead Island is this whole section after Wano where we are just going to get a lot more info dumps. Again, similar to Zou, but I think on an even more significant scale. So that's all for this. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you all later.